Thank you for coming online. We're just hanging out today talking about fiber arts. And if you have any questions about maybe running or keeping your motivation up in this economy or being creative or ideas or how to do stuff or where to find how to learn resources, we also have some questions that or like topics that we can talk about too.
Cool. Yes, I'm still
what's
getting used to seeing people, where I'm used to YouTube, so I'm like seeing where
Yeah.
all the things are popping up. Thanks for having me on here. I felt like we started having this text message conversation like several times over, and I'm glad to get to do it in like a not texting while chasing my kids around, even though my kids are chasing the new puppy around in the other room. So I've told them not to come bother me unless anything really major is happening. But they know how to clean up puppy messes. So I think we're okay for now. It was the first day of school here. I know your kids haven't quite gotten to first day of school yet.
I'm starting on August 12th, but I started math like 3 weeks ago because I needed some structure. I'm homeschooling this year, but I use a video curriculum. So they watch another teacher and I just make sure that they're doing the work. So it's not like I'm teaching all three grades.
That sounds doable.
Yeah.
That sounds doable.
Yeah.
No, so far all I've gotten out of my kids was their description of the lunch lady always sounds like Mrs. Crabtree, the bus driver from South Park. So like that's all I can picture. So like that was the most I got out of them on like how was the first day of school. So I'm like, all right, well that's still the same. That hasn't changed. It's been the same description for 5 years now. But no, I feel you on the structure. And then today, of course, was a half day. My kids go to public school, and so it was like 3 whole hours, and I had to really fight with myself because I'm really bad, and I know with like working from home, especially being like ADD too, I'm really bad about, as my dad calls it, like kicking it into like overdrive, and I do that way too well, where like I'm like, okay, I got 3 hours, I got to do 500 things right now.
Yes.
And I slowly, even though that has served me well in my life, like I've accomplished a lot, I don't know that at this point I think that's the best way to do it. So I'm trying to be much more mindful about like, okay, I made a list and I'm going to do the list, and this was on my list, and I'm going to do what's on there, and then I'm not going to try to do 8 things at one time, and I might drink coffee and read a book, and it's going to be okay. And so I'm very excited about more structure though, because it has just been a free for all around here lately.
Yeah, that's one of the things recently, just this past month, I've caught myself multiple times thinking of ideas and then being like, well, how can I turn this into a business? How can I make money on this? How can I and I have to stop myself and be like, just because it's an idea, just because you're excited about it doesn't mean that you need to take it into that space of like turning it into a business. And it reminded me of how we've talked about like, what do you call yourself?
Oh, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I can't, like some people are, what is it, serial monogamist? I'm a serial entrepreneur. And I do have things that, like, yoga is my thing. And even though I have toyed around with going through, just my yoga studio has like a teacher training that like I would just love to take, yoga's my thing that I like, that and just working out, that's like not a business. But so like that and reading are kind of like, because I don't want to own a bookstore, but I do write. So I'm a serial monogamist. I have a problem. So even the 2 things that I just mentioned in the back of my head, I'm already like, well, that's kind of a thing that I do. So I need help.
On today's episode of We Need Help.
I don't know how not to be that way. I think, and I wish anybody had pointed that out to me in school, because like nobody did. Nobody pointed that out to me in school, and so I went to college and got 2 4-year degree. I double majored, and my whole plan was I was going to teach, and I was going to be like an academic, which is hilarious because I barely made it through school. So I guess I was going to be like the champion of the other dyslexic idiots somewhere, but I don't know why no one was like, hey, clearly you're a serial entrepreneur and that's what you should do.
That's interesting. So, yeah, it's almost like an addiction where it's like you get a high. And I'm speaking like from my own experience, having had that and getting to a point in my midlife where I'm like recognizing it now and pausing before I take it where I imagine it needs to go. It's like being a visionary, or you have this idea and you can see yourself building this thing, but the process of building it is probably bigger than I anticipate most of the time. And in the process of building, I'll come up with like 4 or 5 other things that I want to do instead. So yeah, I can relate to that. And it's about editing. And I think that also kind of goes into survivability of like small business or fiber arts, is like how being able to edit yourself.
When you say edit yourself, do you mean like edit the content you're putting out or edit your business ideas?
I think I mean, what do I mean? Okay, so I'll use an example. So I was in an art show the past couple weeks and I brought so much stuff and I used all of the space that they gave me. And then I walked around the rest of the room and everyone else had these like small, organized, tidy, and mine was like a mess. And I was like,
yours because that's how it was. So I'm no help.
I was like, I wonder if things would be more impactful if I had less.
I feel like if you know, like even interior design or style, like it's constantly goes from like minimalist to maximalist.
Yeah.
And I feel like I really enjoy both.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. I mean, I think both are equally good and equally impactful, and if done correctly. Because I mean, minimalist can just get sterile and like okay, so this black dot means that, okay, and then maximalist can get cluttery, but
yeah,
I think there's finding a happy medium in that.
And I think that's what I mean by editing, is knowing when you need to go more minimal and when you need to go more maximal.
Well, I love your display, so I think you hit it.
Yeah. So I think that's one of my things is like, is adding this. So like I have different product ideas and it's like, okay, is adding this product going to enhance what I'm doing or detract from what I'm doing?
I feel you on that. I think I've already kind of gone through a lot of that in my business. And I'm just now realizing I didn't bring my emotional support water bottle. I'm somewhat panicking, but it's okay. I shall persevere or yell at my children and make them bring it to me.
Emotional support coffee.
But I feel like I went through that a lot with my business. And I've been doing, I don't know if you've seen, like I said, my domain is definitely more of YouTube than Instagram. I started, thank you. Whoever just wrote something nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
I made some sort of wacky commitment to myself for no apparent reason when we got back from vacation. I think because I was feeling adrift and unhinged. And I was like, I want to do 30 days. And I was like, I'm not going to do it on the weekends. But I was like, I want to do 30 days worth of videos. I think they usually call it like an orbit. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. And, like I said, not weekends. And I did actually, I've already cheated. And I took one day off because I had food poisoning. So I was just like, I'm not doing anything. But so I'm gonna tack one on the end. But I've been doing very good. And the loose topic is I'm wanting to document pretty much a day in the life of running a kind of indie arts business out of your house. And this is something I've thought about a lot in the past and I've never done, because like talking about editing, I think it was over editing in my head where I felt like I couldn't do that unless I had a real and I guess this goes back to my background in wanting to teach, real today we're going to this, that, and another, and this day we're going to, I felt like it had to be. And from working at home, like some days you're really like in the grind doing it, and then other days, yesterday I ended up just making a YouTube short. So I was like, I'm gonna take advantage of that, but I added it to the playlist, and it was because it was the last day of summer break, and like my kids ended up having friends over, and we ended up making like these ridiculous, stupid brownies that took the entire day, and I got stuff done that I needed to get done, but like it wasn't any sort of great earth-shattering content. And I really started to beat myself up about it. And then I was just like, no, I'm going to make a YouTube short, and that's what it's going to be. And I'm going to put it up there, and my explanation is going to be that I was doing it. I'm pretty much just doing it for me, to be accountable to myself. But that's what it looks like. Like some days you're really doing stuff that looks impressive, and then other days you're sticking stuff in bags and shipping it and then making brownies. So I mean, it's honest at least.
So that's, I guess, a question I have, because I've wrestled with this too, is like I have kind of a perfectionism streak. Like, I love Martha Stewart, and she has a whole team that makes everything like perfect. And so I'm like, if I don't do this well, then it's not going to be taken seriously. Or it's like I kind of handicap myself by needing to be perfect or present. I don't need to be perfect, but I want what I present to be like, yes.
I have lots of thoughts on that. Hold on, I need my emotional support water.
Okay. So yeah, I'm just gonna monologue. I end up, I think, overthinking things, and I don't know. I don't know if it would be more valuable to be more casual. Like, what is the trend nowadays with so many people putting out so much content all the time? Is it better? And it's whatever works for you is the best, obviously. But is it better? Are people more interested in like the raw, imperfect, everyday stuff? Or are people more interested in the like perfect lighting, well edited? Oh, here's a question.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
I love it. I didn't see the question, but I have lots of thoughts and feelings about what you just said.
Yeah. So how do you, and there are seasons, right? There are seasons where you can, like right now is my dying season. So I'm dying. And that's a great
joke. I noticed you did all the dying yesterday.
I'm dying. Every day I'm dying. I love dying.
I feel like that needs to be like a t-shirt with like a skull and a dye pot, but then that's
I love dying. So every day I'm dying. But that's the season, and I do like big project work. That's how I work. Even with my videos, I recorded like all of them in a month, and so it's like I know that's what works for.
Yeah, we've talked about that, where me and you are total different sides of the same coin on that. I think that's how we worked well with like any work we've done with Spinlution. And that's why like your picture, I laughed at like all your braids from yesterday, and I was just like, I would literally like you were dying, I wouldn't have died. Like I would have gotten halfway through that project, and then I would have been sitting in the middle of a bunch of, I would have just been crying. Like that would have been way too much. I wouldn't have been able to deal with it. The puppy would have eaten it all. Whereas you're really good at like a whole bunch of stuff, and then you baked it, and I almost feel like that's better. Whereas with me, I'm really good at kicking the can down the road a little further each day, but like I can't focus on like too big of a thing will really wig me out.
Yeah, portion control is part of that editing process, where like you know yourself that you're not going to start your day and dye 20 pounds of wool that day. But I think I have the ability to kind of like hyper focus on something and get a huge amount done, and it's more difficult for me to transition. And I think that's why I do big chunks, whereas I think for you flow through your day with a lot smoother transitions.
Yeah, that's probably, well, I think I caught the tail end of what you were saying when I had to go get my water, because I can't talk and not have water apparently. I have really noticed, just from following marketers and being just, I don't have an anthropology degree, so I watch everything like I'm an outsider. I really feel like, and I know you and I feel like almost exactly the same age. We're both in the like elder millennial category.
I'll be 42 this year.
Yeah, I'm turning 40 this year. Yeah, I knew we were in like that same Gen X, xennial little sliver there.
Yes.
I really feel like the people I've seen really struggle with perfectionism are like the legit millennials, like the ones that are younger than me.
Okay.
And I feel like watching them in business when like the whole like girl boss thing happened in 2010, it was the whole like, all of a sudden everybody was like, you can do it, girl boss, #boss babe, like all that. It was very like, that was when I feel like a lot of people got on Instagram at that time, and I personally felt very alienated by it because it was very, like, you'll remember, it was the flat lay. Everything was a flat lay with a coffee cup and like a diagonal piece of notebook paper, and like everything was perfect. And that was very millennial to me, even though I am like an elder millennial. I was always a bad millennial though, and I identified much more. I have much more like punk rock roots of more like Gen X. It is more my vibe, and I always personally felt very outsider in that. And I remember even like listening to podcasts and stuff that I really liked. The focus was all on editing and perfection, and there was a lot of people, and I mean for a reason. I think a lot of people really like that really spoke to a lot of people. And I was like getting the information out of it, but it didn't speak to me. And I feel like the younger generation, I almost kind of fit in better with. For as much as they all like to pick on millennials, I definitely, if you just look at even the video editing of a lot of the content creators that are maybe like 10 years younger than us, or more, if we really want to feel old, it's much more, and I can't do it, but you know what I mean, like the wiggly camera thing, like it's much more free flow. And then I have kids my kids are older than your kids, so my kids are already in that, like, they're trying to be little baby teenagers at this point with all the dancing. They're much more, they love making silly little videos with their friends and dancing around with the puppy and all of that, but it's much more organic and free flow. And I feel like I almost fit in better with either the older or the younger, but that millennial perfectionism was not ever anything I was good at, and I feel like it's kind of pivoting. But then there's definitely, like you said with Martha Stewart, I love Martha too. So, and my aunts, I always joke my aunts were like the original Martha Stewarts. They're like the same age, and so I grew up with a lot of that. And I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about perfectionism, but I'm friends with a lot of perfectionists, so I see your pain.
I think it kind of comes down to like what you were saying, personal preference and what works for you. And so I think like for anyone who's doing fiber arts or small business, knowing what works best for you will give you the endurance you need through all the different economies, as opposed to trying to do things like someone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's what sabotages a lot of people, is when they're trying to, like, oh, if they see like Ashley's dyeing all this wool, that means I need to dye all of my wool in a week. And that's not the key to success. Like, you don't need to do it like that.
Yeah.
And so, figuring out what is your natural workflow, which is kind of like, when do you have most of your energy? Are you like a morning person or a night person? What are the other things that need to get done before you can feel creative? Like, can you be creative in a messy space, or do you need to tidy your space first?
You need to tidy your space. That is the eternal struggle of my life, is between trying to get my house, my life, and my family in order to then feel like, okay, now I can be creative. And I make getting better, but that's probably one of my larger struggles, which is what I'm trying to document. Like I said, in my silly thing that I'm doing on YouTube is, and I'm trying to just really be honest, because I do get self-conscious and I edit stuff out. I'm like, oh, the internet trolls are all gonna go off on this one or whatever, and I'm trying really hard to make this be a process of making myself be more honest.
As long as it makes you stronger. I think for me, I kind of had to also figure out what worked for me regarding my transparency. Like, I would put my heart out there and it wouldn't be respected. And so I learned that I needed to set boundaries with the internet in general. Carol agrees. She needs tidy house, tidy mind.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I had to have the very real discussion with my kids yesterday that it was a vertical surface issue. I was like, you'll have to look at all vertical surfaces, and if it's not supposed to be there, it needs to not be there, or my brain is going to fall out of my head. And
like
they might not understand that, but I understand it. So
yeah, I like that. Yeah, just figuring out what works for you for workflow, and then also for like quantity too. Like for me, I got a lot of closeout goal that I'm going through. I wasn't planning on dying this much, but I have it. And so it's like, well, let's fit that in. Whereas you don't need, just because an opportunity comes, doesn't mean that you need to pursue it in your business. That was another thing too. I see a lot of stuff.
That's the one. If anything good comes up, that could segue into the that one time that we ended up doing. God, I feel like it was 1,000 mini cakes of yarn to be in the Twice Sheared Sheep Advent calendar, which I do not regret. I do not regret, but it was probably one of the more insane things I've ever done. Especially, it is 100% the most insane thing I've done business-wise. But I'm glad I did it because Dawn's my friend, and it was good to be. I can now say that we were part of the Twice Sheared Sheep Advent box. But yeah, that was definitely an opportunity that I was just like, yeah, we'll do that and figure it out. And then we did, but you know.
Yeah, like what things am I not gonna do again?
Yeah, well, making 1,000 mini cakes of yarn is 100% something I'm not doing again.
Yeah, yeah, that's too much. So for me, I also struggle with like too much repetition in specific areas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find dyeing to be repetitive because I don't track my dye lots. I don't measure. I know because I've been doing it for over a decade what I need, kind of like making a chili or whatever. Like I know what it's supposed to look like, or eyeballing or whatever. But I don't like track or graph or record all of my colorways because that kind of removes the fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it keeps it in that play mode. Whereas like bagging stuff, that's where I start to lose motivation. And that's when I'll have my friend come over and be like, hey, do you want to like drink coffee, listen to a podcast, bag, roll nuts together? You know, because it's like,
that's where I start making my kids do stuff. Mm-hmm. That's where all the chores come in around here. It's cutting out labels and taping them on bags and that sort of thing. So,
and it teaches them the value of using your time at home in this way. I was listening to a podcast about like the history of textiles and how traditionally it was women's work because women were home having children, raising children, preparing food. It just made sense. Nobody really saw it as a negative that the men would do this and the women would do this and they would make their textiles at home. And then when the Industrial Revolution came, that actually took the work away from the women. And so it was kind of like if you were a feminist back then, you were against the industrialization of textile arts because you were being robbed of what was rightfully your work. Someone was taking your work. And yet nowadays people look at it like, well, now women have the freedom to work outside the home, and it's like not everyone wants to do that. So being able to kind of take that back and do it from your own home, it just fits so naturally because it was that way for thousands and thousands of years. And so I think that's one of the reasons I started in textile arts is I wanted something that I could do that would help me maintain balance.
Definitely fits in well it's something you can do in different pockets of your life. And that's kind of why I liked knitting when I got started on knitting just in general, just from a craft point of view, is I liked that you could, as we've talked about me and dyeing, I like that you could pick it up and put it down. and that seemed to be a good thing with me. Whereas like painting or sculpting or what something else more official, you have to like set everything up, and then you have to focus and do it. And like, but with me, if I'm knitting a scarf, I can knit a couple stitches and put it down, and knit a couple stitches and put it down, and I can take it to the movies, and I can take it in the kitchen, and that seems just that's I guess what got me in the fiber arts to start with was the how it bleeds into your life, if we want to go for a bad word pun there. But it definitely, I agree with you there. And I think I talked about it in my book, the idea of like, I think they used to call it like coffee can money, where like your grandma or whatever, she always had money to like, even though they were supposedly submit, dependent on everyone for, their own money. I mean, they all had money tucked away somewhere in the house that they tucked away from here, or knitted things and sold them, or canned things and sold them, or this person could, everybody had their thing they were good at that you could then get money from doing. And I always feel like the fiber arts, that was like the original, it was one of the original things that women could really do, to have that money that was set aside, that was just kind of money for like when your kids needed something or you wanted something, and it didn't have to affect like your big major pay all the bills income. And I think that's important to keep around. And for whatever reason, yeah, the fiber arts just always plays into that well.
Yeah, if you go through archaeology, the oldest, there's kind of an argument of what came first, textiles or pottery, where it's like, what do you need first, clothes or things to cook with?
In my opinion, like, I'm going to vote for the same time.
You need both. Everyone needs both.
Everybody needs both.
Everyone needs both. Everyone needs a bowl to eat their soup out of, and everyone needs a blanket to keep them warm at night, So it's like those are two industries that happen at home traditionally and still work. Imagine that thousands and thousands of years later.
And we really haven't changed that much. So,
yeah,
basic needs are still pretty much what basic needs are. But I mean, that's one thing I've always really I think has drawn me to the fiber arts, even though my interest, I started out in sales and fine arts, and then the fiber arts has kind of been like my umbrella, like my realm that I live in, even though my interest and expertise is probably more broad than that. But I mean, I'm never going to not be in the fiber arts in some capacity, just because it really speaks to me. It's the perfect my two majors were art history and anthropology, and so to me the fiber arts is, I wanted to do visual anthropology is what I wanted to teach. So then I ended up, fiber arts is visual anthropology, like you said. It was one of the first ways to do tapestry. It was such an original way to do that. And so I mean, I definitely feel like I found my home as far as that goes. And I'm not going anywhere, even though I may be more into writing and the arts in general. The fiber arts is my niche.
Well, there's different seasons in life as well. Like, I took 10 years off of retail when I had babies because I didn't have the capacity to ship orders and be up at night feeding a baby and running a household. So I think there's also like, it's okay. I told several people who are just losing the joy, like, it's okay to take a break, and we even do that on a small scale. Like, if we're working on a knitted project and we burn out on it, it's okay to set it aside and start something else.
Yeah.
It's okay. So yeah.
Are you encountering a lot of people? I know you've been talking with that, you said have been coming into kind of a burnout phase. Is that something? I mean, I'm a hermit. I feel like you are less of a fiber arts hermit than I am. I never know what's going on. Is that something you've been running into?
The algorithm is bringing all of that to me. So I don't know if that's actually as loud as it is. I also tend to not follow a lot of people just because I like to keep my inspiration like focused on what comes out of my head rather than seeing what everyone else is doing, which can be inspiring but can also be discouraging. or it can feel a little bit like when you're on the same wavelength as someone, it can be like, oh, I thought that was a really creative idea I just had, and now I see somebody else has it too.
Yes.
And
so that's why I kind of had to become a hermit. Was when I first was starting, I would think that something was like, this is so great, and then I'd see that somebody already had like some beautiful fancy shop in Nashville doing the same thing, and I was just like, well,
yeah,
it made me feel like I don't even want to bother doing it. Where now I'm more the other side, where I'm like, I shall take them down with SEO and internet capabilities. So now I'm that person, but
that's
somebody has to be, I guess. But
well, it just kind of protects my energy a little bit. Like that's another thing is on the internet you have to know how to protect your boundaries and how to not lead. For me, I'm a feeler. I'm not really a logical person. I do a lot of stuff intuitively, and I can get drained by people really easily. And so I just keep my but the algorithm brings content to me, and a lot of it seems like there's a lot of people who got into the industry in 2019, bought their supplies super high, and are discouraged that the fiber arts community doesn't have the resources monetarily to keep them in business. I think they were looking for a community that it was like, hey, if I join this community, we're all going to buy each other stuff and we're all going to live these really comfortable lifestyles, and almost like this idea of like an unlimited amount of resources, maybe. If I'm reading in between the lines correctly, I tend to take people at their word, and so I often don't see sarcasm when I'm reading stuff online. So I could be in left field.
That's why I have to put haha at the end of everything I type. Like that's why people don't like the laughing face emoji. I'm like, no, I have to have that, or everyone thinks I'm a bitch. It's fine.
So it seems like there are some people that are discouraged because they haven't been through this before. And I think that's normal because you have, again, like this vision of what it's going to be like. And you also set yourself up in the situation where it's like, I'm here and I'm going to be here forever and I'm never going to quit. And not everything in our lives works out like that. And that's normal too. That's okay. So it's almost adjusting to realizing maybe my aim needs to be changed a little bit, or I need to diversify. Or for me, I've always, before I had kids, I always had a full-time job with fiber arts. I never did just fiber arts except for 2 like summers in my life. I was a real estate broker on the Oregon coast for 5 years while I was doing fiber arts. I've been property manager, I've been kind of not the boss, but a bossy person since I was like 16. So
your natural calling.
My natural calling is to be a boss. But then when I had kids, it was like, well, childcare is ridiculous, and why have kids if you're gonna have someone else? Like it was just a decision that my husband and I made. So now I'm home with them, and now I'm back into the retail side of fiber arts, and I've seen this kind of like season of the buyer-seller market happen 2, maybe 3 times, and like now is the season like for the people who got into it to sell stuff. The thrill becomes now the hunt for the good deal. So like on Facebook Marketplace, I just picked up 2 big buckets of weaving cones for free. I've picked up somebody's entire dye stash for like 90% off. The wool that I'm dyeing now, I got for like 90% off a year ago from a fiber artist who was retiring. And so it's like you look for how to get your bottom dollar as low as possible so that when you do sell, you can sell fair, like not undercut, but you end up with more, what is it called? Like your net profit is higher than it would have been had you bought at full price.
Oh, for sure.
Because I think that's where people struggle too, is if you're buying everything, even if it says wholesale, if you're buying yarn at $10 a skein, you still have to dye and get the materials and water and whatever. And if you go to the craft store, a lot of people are able to buy yarn for $3, $4, $5 a skein. So you're already like your product base is twice as much as what people are buying. And that's a difficult market to be in this kind of economy.
Yeah. No, that's definitely competition if you're in the craft industry of any sort is Hobby Lobby and Michaels and Marshalls and what I can't say it right. I know one thing I always loved all of that. I don't think she's on YouTube anymore, but Renee Christine had a bunch of stuff on YouTube on handmade business, and one of I guess it was a video. I just remember her talking somewhere about pretty much what you were just saying with that you had to have actual wholesalers. She was in the stationery business, so like totally different business than us. But the same thing you were just saying of when people wanted to know how, and I guess I see that a lot in like fiber arts groups, questions about wholesaling. And I actually used to used to wholesale to like yarn shops. That was I guess where I started, and you definitely have to have actual wholesale supplies in order to be able to do that. You can't be like Hobby Lobby cannot be your wholesale supplies.
Yes.
I feel like that's where a lot of people, same thing with like boxes, even though I personally get a lot of stuff off Amazon as far as like tissue paper and poly mailers and that sort of thing. So I feel like maybe it's less true now with that sort of stuff than it used to be. But you know, like if you're selling coffee mugs or something, like you don't want to be buying the boxes you're shipping them in even at like not an actual wholesale. So that was one thing she was really big on that I remember when I was first starting out was like finding legit wholesalers even for stuff like packaging.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree. I think that's something a lot of people I see really, even though it's funny you're sitting there saying that, and I think I get overwhelmed. Clearly, is my issue. My husband's like always on Facebook Marketplace for like, you know, he's like, oh, look at this weird truck, or I don't know. He finds all the things on Facebook Marketplace. I cannot tell you the last time I even glimpsed Facebook Marketplace because it's that I can't even, like, I have to have toilet paper magically show up at my house or I will forget to buy it. Like, I am that person. So, like, when it comes to my business, I'm very picky on my suppliers, but I'm very loyal. So it's like once I find this is maybe 3 good options, and I'm a big systems person. So I'm not so much an opportunist as I have to have systems, and that might not be the best way. I'm not here to be like that's the way to do it, but for me, I would not have a business anymore if it involved me having to use my brain to come up with. I'm not good enough to do that. I have to have it just show up. Like I have to. If anybody that's worked with me knows that I will get distracted, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh crap, I have to have that, and then I have to be able to email the person at like 10:30 at night when I thought about it and be like, okay, I need the merino now, like, you know. So yeah.
I had totally taken for granted, or I hadn't even considered that there are a lot of fiber artists out there who are systems oriented.
Oh, I guess you should see the amount of alarms I have just to function as a human being. Like I have to have one to get up, then I have to have one for make sure the kids are up, and then I have to have one for don't forget to go pick up your kids. I had to have one today because it was an early out day to not forget to go get my own children from the school. So I mean I have to have, it's a lot of alarm, it's a lot of systems for me to just exist.
And it would take too much energy for you to go through the hunt for supplies, whereas for me, I've always hunted for supplies. There is only one supplier that I buy from, like RH Lindsay. I'll go there to stock up, but everything else that I get has always been like from yard sales. Always.
Really? Oh man. That makes me itchy just thinking about it. Like I can't.
my it's always been, it's either someone died, someone's retiring,
RH
someone's
Lindsay's on here being
relocating.
excited that they're the. Yes, you're one of my systems too, RH Lindsay. So you are the ones that get the emails from me at 10:30 at night. They're like, I need the Marino. So yes.
Yes. Yes.
Poly mailers and that sort of thing. So I feel like maybe it's less true now with that sort of stuff than it used to be. But you know, like if you're selling coffee mugs or something, like you don't want to be buying the boxes you're shipping them in even at like not an actual wholesale. So that was one thing she was really big on that I remember when I was first starting out was like finding legit wholesalers even for stuff like packaging.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree. I think that's something a lot of people I see really, even though it's funny you're sitting there saying that, and I think I get overwhelmed. Clearly, is my issue. My husband's like always on Facebook Marketplace for like, you know, he's like, oh, look at this weird truck, or I don't know. He finds all the things on Facebook Marketplace. I cannot tell you the last time I even glimpsed Facebook Marketplace because it's that I can't even, like, I have to have toilet paper magically show up at my house or I will forget to buy it. Like, I am that person. So, like, when it comes to my business, I'm very picky on my suppliers, but I'm very loyal. So it's like once I find this is maybe 3 good options, and I'm a big systems person. So I'm not so much an opportunist as I have to have systems, and that might not be the best way. I'm not here to be like, that's the way to do it. But for me, I would not have a business anymore if it involved me having to use my brain to come up with. I'm not good enough to do that. I have to have it just show up. Like I have to, because if anybody that's worked with me knows that I will get distracted, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh crap, I have to have that, and then I have to be able to email the person at like 10:30 at night when I thought about it and be like, okay, I need the Marino now. Like, you know,
I had totally taken for granted, or I hadn't even considered that there are a lot of fiber artists out there who are systems oriented.
Oh,
I guess like
you should see the amount of alarms I have just to function as a human being. Like I have to have one to get up, then I have to have one for make sure the kids are up, and then I have to have one for don't forget to go pick up your kids. I had to have one today because it was an early out day to not forget to go get my own children from the school. So I mean, I have to have, it's a lot of alarms, it's a lot of systems for me to just exist.
And it would take too much energy for you to go through the hunt for supplies. Whereas for me, I've always hunted for supplies. There is only one supplier that I buy from, like RH Lindsay. I'll go there to stock up. But everything else that I get has always been like from yard sales. Always.
Really? Oh man. Oh, that makes me itchy just thinking about it. Like I can't.
It's always been, it's either someone died, someone's retiring, someone's
Lindsay's on here being
relocating.
excited that they're the. Yes, you're one of my systems too, RH Lindsay. So you are the ones that get the emails from me at 10:30 at night. They're like, I need the Marino. So
Yes. So yeah, I've always, and I think that's really, I hadn't considered that, and I think that's because I think more people are going to do it the way you're doing it.
You think? Because see, I had this epiphany about myself maybe about a year ago. I think 50% of what I thought was my actual personality is just some sort of coping mechanism for being slightly off. Like that's And I'm like, it's funny. I mean, but not like, I'm dead serious. I really thought many things that I thought were like just, oh, that's me. Like, it's not me. It's a coping mechanism for my like unmedicated insanity, and that works for me. But I don't like when I was writing the book. A lot of that, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I guess if you were also lean towards the ADHD, then yeah, if you're ADHD at all, you got to have systems or you're gonna die.
Yes. I I think midlife is one of those perspectives where you look back at who you are and you see who you've always been, but then you also kind of go like, I think I would. So I think maybe we're kind of in a era of finding people locally that you can network with, like local craft shows, local businesses, local buyers. And maybe since the internet is so loud, things will become more successful on a local level.
Well, that's how I started when we moved here and we were like living in a hotel with the kids when they were literal babies. I was excited that we're actually, Knoxville had, and it still does, had a pretty decent network of yarn shops. And I drove around and we just went in yarn shops. And I mean, I remember my kids were like stealing candy off tables. Like it was embarrassing. And, I just kind of went and talked to the different owners and was just kind of like, I would always ask, like, hey, do you have a local artist section? And then if they did, I'd always go check it out and like kind of see where it was leaning and, what was in there and usually buy something because why not? And I would kind of introduce that way. And then that's how I kind of opened the door to selling things as far as hand spun or spinning fiber went. I definitely did some trunk shows that started the same way. So if you were trying to sell locally, because a lot of people are much more comfortable that way. Trunk shows, I mean, most yarn shops I feel like are excited to do that. It gives them something to promote and it lets you sell stuff there. So I would definitely just go around, I mean, make yourself some business cards on Canva and, print out something. And I mean, I feel like most yarn shop owners that I've dealt with, at least around here, they were excited to work with new people. And I mean, they were definitely willing to like, throw you a bone. And I also learned stuff from them. So I mean, I would just be honest, be like, hey, I was always just like, hey, we just moved here, and I'm a computer. I'm definitely an e-commerce girl. So like I'm online for the duration. But a lot of people I know are much happier. My friend Heidi, I always with Cocoon Homespun, she's like the booth queen. So, that's her jam. Whereas like once again it makes me itchy. So Heidi's my other you. She's my other person in the fiber arts who we are very similar in some ways and very different in others. And she is like the booth queen, whereas I am not. So I just show up at her booths occasionally and like say hi to people. But that's what I would do if you were trying to sell locally. Also, Knoxville had a great spinners guild. So I always recommend people check out for if there's a fiber arts, like a spinners guild in your area. I actually had, and unfortunately she's passed away. She was a good friend of mine too back, when the guild used to get together more. But I had gotten some good suppliers for things back. See, I did hunt for things occasionally. It was just locally at the Spinners Guild. So
Yeah.
that would be my advice from somebody who did it and started out that way.